Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers Podcast. I am Jody Grunwald. This week, my guest is Michael Boerner, CEO of Engage Technologies. Michael comes to us from Boise, Idaho. He is a wealth of knowledge and inspiration. During this episode, we talk about creating unity, empathy, kindness, and engaging technology. From being the expert of intent to the expert of impact. Being quick to listen and slow to speak. Along with having great ideological debate without relational conflict. There are so many takeaways from this episode. Michael is an entrepreneur responsible for innovating a number of short-form video-based enterprise technologies enabling data-driven video personalization and mass constituent engagement. He has appeared nationally on CNN, Fox News, ABC Radio Network News, as well as numerous press articles covering his media and technology innovations. He is a TedMed 2013 Frontline Scholar, as well as a national award-winning film and video producer and technologist. He led one of the first hospital pilots to use the iPad for patient engagement the day iPad debuted on April 3, 2010 at the Disney Children's Hospital in Orlando. Michael's clients have included Johnson & Johnson, CVS, Ford, Covidien, UPMC, St. Luke's Health System, Penn Blanchard Companies, and so many more. The goal of Engage Technologies is to help remove barriers to patient education. Patients go along a uniquely guided path that empowers them and helps to shrink knowledge gaps. That is done by customized short videos that is sent directly to their phone from their personal physician. Michael shares a quick tutorial video on the YouTube channel for all to see. From inspiration to technology, get ready for a conversation filled with so many takeaways. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Today's the Day Changemakers YouTube channel, stream this podcast on all streaming sites, comment, like, and share, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day Live It. The views expressed by all Today's the Day Changemakers podcast guests are their own. Their appearance on the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast does not imply any endorsement of them or any entity that they represent. Have a great week, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grunwald, and every single week I get to interview the most incredible people, the inspirers, the changemakers, those who are just busting through the status quo. They don't take no for an answer. And I am just so thrilled to have Michael Boerner here with me today. Hi, Michael. How are you?
Hello, Jody. Great to be with you.
Oh, it's so great to have you here too, from beautiful Idaho, correct?
That's right. Boise, Idaho, the other tech capital, if you want to keep that going.
All right, good. I like it. I like it a lot. Yes, definitely not my next door neighbor here in New Jersey. And I think it sounds like it's warmer by you than it is here in New Jersey. So that's great. Send it our way, please.
Yes.
That's awesome. I'm going to read your bio like I do for everybody, because everybody's bio is so special because it's words on a paper, but it takes a lot of work to get there. So I do this because I want to read it correctly. So Michael Boerner is the founder and CEO of Engage Technologies Group and has over 25 years of experience founding and leading technology and media companies. He is an entrepreneur responsible for innovating a number of short-form video-based enterprise technology engaging and enabling, data-driven video personalization and mass constituent engagement. Oh my goodness, Michael, that was definitely a mouthful. Michael's clients have included Johnson & Johnson, CVS, Ford, Samsung, United Healthcare, Covidien, UPMC, St. Luke's Health System, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, and the Penn Blanchard Companies, just to name a few, which is totally incredible. I'm going to go on, though. There's a little bit more here that I definitely want to share. Is a TedMed 2013 Frontline Scholar, as well as a national award-winning film and video producer and technologist. He led one of TedMed 2013 Frontline Scholar, as well as, he led one of the first hospital pilots to use the iPad for patient engagement the day iPad debuted on April 3rd, 2010 at the Disney Children's Hospital in Orlando. That had to be incredible, Michael. We're going to talk about that because sounds incredible. And two other quick things. You were appointed by the governor of Idaho to the governor's coordinating council for families and children and served on the board of directors for the National Institute of Marriage, a nonprofit entity started by bestselling author Gary Smalley. And then also you appeared nationally on CNN, Fox News, ABC Radio Network News, as well as other numerous press articles covering media and technology innovations that you are a part of. So how does it feel to hear all of that you've done? And I didn't even read all of it.
Well, I'll tell you, it feels like a lot of memories that we really enjoyed. And I have to tell you, though, reading your bio is another special list of people who serve and give. And so I feel like I should be interviewing you with all your great accomplishments, but honored to be here to talk about innovation and some of the ways we can try to serve people with new methodologies.
Oh, Michael, thank you. That's so kind of you to say. I really do appreciate it. And that is why I think that, like-minded people who just want to make a difference in the world, and we just like to lift each other up. And that's what this podcast is all about. So I appreciate you so much for being here. And
Right.
I want to hear about you. So now tell us, did you grow up in Boise? Have you lived there all your life? So what kind of child were you? I always like to go back a little bit and learn more about the person before they got to where they are today.
Yeah, you bet. Grew up here in Boise. Was the eldest child of a fairly good sized group of cousins and aunts and uncles. And Boise is a great place. It's kind of been discovered now. The turf is blue here, and since the Fiesta Bowl, I think Boise has really been on the map. And it is a growing community, but it's one of those places where if you like four seasons, there's probably no better place to live. It's just a great environment. But went off to college to study computer science back in the early 80s. And back then, my goal was to be president of IBM. I thought, computers and ways of being able to use new technology would be a great way to serve. And then ended up having kind of an interesting change in my life. I had a conversion to Christianity early in my kind of walk, and that kind of really changed my perspective on a number of things. And it kind of moved me into deciding to change my career to study more of a filmmaking and media environment, because I just ended up feeling this great kind of compelling desire to find ways to be able to scale information that could really help people. And so the media back then, before the internet, if you remember in the early 80s, we didn't have, email and internet to be able to deal with things, if you remember the simpler days. But broadcast media was the most effective way to kind of get communication out. And so I ended up starting a media company to create film and television commercials and create ways to be able to really help families and deal with marriage and parenting and all kinds of ways to be able to get nonprofits and churches to work together to really try to improve the community in the Boise area and then beyond. And so we used to buy TV commercials and things in the NBC and CBS and MTV that would really improve kind of the communication around things that could really impact people's lives. And ended up later meeting Gary Smalley, who is a best-selling author on marriage, and found more and more ways to find scalable information that could really add value to someone's life. And so that's kind of what I really enjoy doing. But ended up moving back here in '89, married a beautiful woman named Natalie. So wife of 32 years, we've got 4 daughters. And so we didn't have a lot of holes in our walls, but a lot more tissue. So raising 4 girls, you've got girls, you know the feeling at times, but I love being a dad, and all 4 of our girls are finished with college now. And it's just a great time to be alive and working in technology now and dealing with innovation at kind of the next level.
Absolutely. And go back to your comment, which is so funny and so true. Not a good time during a pandemic to have to worry about tissue, right? Especially we had a lot of problems here in New Jersey with that. So so it's so wonderful and so interesting to hear the work that you've done and that you're still doing. Tell us a little bit about, give it or story of where the work you did really, you had an aha moment there. I'm sure there was something that happened, because I can see when you talk about the work that you did and the education around bringing families together and marriage, you can just see that it lights you up.
Well, what's interesting about kind of my perspective, I don't know exactly where this came from, but I always grew up with this idea around how do you get people to work together to do things you couldn't do alone. I just always had this feeling of unity around getting people to do things together that could actually make a major impact that you couldn't do without, collecting people into proximity and taking on a bigger vision. And also I've always believed that improving the way people do things, there's something about kind of that Edison way of, wouldn't there be a better way? And I've always been kind of fascinated with the concept of every system is capable of a maximum efficiency. And if you think about, for example, Blockbuster Video, our kids were young years ago, used to have to drive to the Blockbuster twice to watch or to rent it and return it. And they were probably doing the best job they possibly could with the physical elements of videotapes and then DVDs. And so their maximum efficiency got them to about a $5 billion valuation. And then infrastructure came along. And so when I was growing up, I always kind of looked for, how do we make things work better? There was always kind of this discontent around the status quo, and not in a negative way. I was a very positive and happy person, but it was always, how do we make this work better? And so I used to carry around years ago chapstick and Banaka, and it was like the Vaseline, the soft one with the little tip. And so that, why don't they put these together? So I used to actually buy the Vaseline, I'd cut the back end, I'd scrape out a good part of the Vaseline, I'd put the Banaka in the back end, and it would actually stick together perfectly. So I could have one thing in my pocket, so I could have fresh breath on one side and moist lips on the other. And so kind of developing products or finding out ways to improve methods has just kind of always been part of my DNA. I'm not sure exactly why, but when you start thinking about how to improve things, we're living at a moment when infrastructure has so matured and it allows new business models to prosper. And so if you remember, in the old days when we didn't have freeways back, very, very long time ago, when they built a freeway into a part of the country, it totally transformed the economic development because of that simple transit system. Then, of course, we laid railroads and we laid fiber in our country, and eventually we had the infrastructure of the internet. And so to go back to the Blockbuster example, when the internet came along, now you could actually stream content. But I find it interesting that this is a very rare moment when two things aren't usually together, and that is to be able to dramatically improve a customer experience, but dramatically decrease cost. So if you can bend the cost curve down and make it far, far more efficient and better experience, that's a very rare moment. And when you think about Netflix, they came along and connected existing switch points into a new innovation about streaming video content. Now you have a 10 times, maybe 100 times better customer experience. No more driving to the store twice. There's no such thing as sold out, and explaining that to the girls. Why is Cinderella sold out? Right? So now you have infrastructure that spawns these new business models. And if you think about the movie rental business, just by an analog, it went from a transactional business model into a subscription model. And now the valuation of that company is at about 240 or so billion instead of 5 billion. And of course, you have a much different experience. It's much, much more rich and effective, and also far less expensive. It's way less expensive to the customer as well. So I've just been fascinated by new infrastructure, enabling us to think about new models that can really disrupt the old-fashioned methods and actually bring tremendous amounts of value into the marketplace, and also be able to actually make it much more efficient for the user.
You have a fabulous strategic mind, that's for sure. I could just, from hearing just your Banaka and your vessel,
Yeah.
and I think that was a fabulous example of you being just inventive from the early on. I mean, that's a good, and you might have just given away a really good idea to somebody. I don't think that, I haven't seen any of that anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think the new strips are like Scotch tape that you can put in your mouth that kind of got rid of Banaka.
Oh yeah. So the Banaka's totally gone.
Yeah.
Business now. I think it's incredible that you're, the way you look at it. And I'm so, thank you for putting it so easy for us to understand about, going from Blockbuster. Although I know there was something about going there. There was something about.
There was. Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you. You'd get there and the kids would be crying by the time, because if Cinderella was sold out. So with that being said, when do you think that entrepreneur mindset set in for you? Like when did that happen?
That's a good question. I don't know when exactly it happened, but ever since a very young age, I always had this optimistic view about whatever's in front of me. And I also had the other part, I think, that's critically important for an entrepreneur, is having this tenacity to not give up. And so it kind of wears out some of my family or friends, because I'll kind of continue on and not give up on things. But I remember when I was a kid, there was one of those gumball machines, and it said out of order, and there were still gumballs in it, and it said out of order. For some reason, my optimistic mind said, well, I'll bet they put that on there, because if you put a quarter in, or actually back then a dime or a nickel, it'll probably give you 5 of them. So I try it. And many times it didn't work, but there was always this, what if we tried a new way? Or what if we challenged the way of thinking? And one time when those kind of speakers that were Bluetooth came out many years ago, big sound bars. And I was actually at the mall, and I was at Radio Shack back when those were around. And I saw one on the display, and I said, hey, do you have any of these for sale? He goes, that's a display model. I said, well, do you have any in the back? Because I'd really like to buy one. He goes, no, we don't. I said, would you mind checking? Yeah, no, we don't have any. Okay. What about the store down on Fairview? No, they don't have them either. Okay, would you mind calling them? Yeah, no, they're out. Okay, so I'm driving home, happen to drive by that store. You know what? I'm going to go in there anyway. And I go in, do you have these? No. Would you mind checking the back? Oh, we do have one. And so for some reason, that's always been kind of a default for me, is just not taking the first or the fifth or the ninth no, and just pressing through. And you have to be careful about pressing that too far. But I found there's so many things on the other end of pressing through to figure it out. And sometimes if you can't get through a barrier, what about going over it? What about going under it? What about blowing it up? What about dissolving it? What about acid? What, everything you can think of. And so I think sometimes entrepreneurs have to have a level of tenacity, yet people skills at the same time, on top of thinking about new ways to innovate and come up with ideas that can add value to people's lives that maybe no one's thought of before.
I'll say I'm sitting here like a bobblehead because I'm so on the ride with you on this. And it's so funny because I just emailed somebody something about a write-up that I'm doing that says, well, we have to go around it, over it, through it, whatever we have to do. And I think that is a message that is so, so important for people. And especially now, right? We're in the pandemic and people are feeling very overwhelmed. And so they're feeling a little bit challenged. They don't know how to move forward. It's different thinking, whether they lost a job or they're not happy where they are, or many things could be going on in someone's life, but it takes a special something within you to say, I'll go around it. I'll go under it. There's another thought process. There's something else. I'll ask someone. That's my other thing. If people forget, you don't always have to fix it yourself. You can ask an expert or a mentor or find a mentor. One of the things, and I want to ask you this question too, is that for me, I think I officially asked my first mentor in an official capacity to be a mentor. I was 40. I always had them, but I never officially asked. Do you have mentors that have helped you and garnered that spirit too, to help you to continue to move through?
Oh, absolutely. That great book by Malcolm Gladwell that talked about outliers was all about really having great mentors and people who pour into you. And so, in my life, I'm really grateful. There's been about 4 or 5 phenomenal people who have poured into my life at various stages along the way. And without those people, you really don't have the ability to continue to grow at the pace that you really intended to, because we're really designed to be in community, and community is where people connect one to another and there to serve. And that's, again, what I appreciate about your career. You've been giving and serving in so many areas of your life by investing care in others. And so I think when we do that systemically as well as personally, I've had people in my life like Lane Franks and Ron Price and Dennis Mansfield and Bob Beal, who are constantly adding value through your life. And I think it's also important we need to be considering who else should we be adding value to. And of course, one of the greatest ways to do that, one of my favorite books is called Love is the Killer App. And he's a former chief solutions officer at Yahoo. And Tim Sanders wrote that book. And essentially, it's about constantly learning so that you can add value to others and show people your love and your compassion and your encouragement, and also share your network without asking for anything back. And so Love is the Killer App is essentially lead with knowledge and give away everybody, all your contacts, because everyone you know is probably 1 or 2 people away from somebody else that you could help. And so that kind of default about a plentiful mentality, I think really helps, everyone grow. But also, I'm just a huge believer, as I'm sure you are, in reading, just constantly looking into the pages of someone else's life that they put between covers of a book that can give us such inspiration. And one of my favorite books is Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth. And the E-Myth is all about this concept. In fact, I have it here on my desk because I'm
look at that. That's awesome.
Making everybody at our company read it. But the E-Myth is all about this concept of this need to create systems for everything. And he opens the book by simply saying, I think something's very relevant. 80% of new businesses are going to fail within 5 years. So 80% of new startups are going to fail, 80%. And there's another business model that has an 80% success rate. They're called franchises. And so his premise is everything needs to have a system. So it's people running systems instead of a founder doing everything himself or herself and never being able to go on vacation because they're so tied to everything that goes on. And so you have kind of an adolescent ceiling that your company hits because the people in the business are always in the business instead of working on the business. Whereas a franchise are people running a system, which is why teenagers can run a McDonald's and profitable. So it's a very interesting thing when you start thinking about it, especially those who are vision minded like I've been. Ever since I read that book probably 25 years ago, it's something that has caused me to see everything through a different grid where you need to systemize everything. If you're opening a pie shop, open it like you're open 5,000 of them. And it makes you have a disciplined methodology to really make it work and scale and be consistent. And so all of that, pick up one guy's life's work and it can transform the way you think forever.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And reading is so, so important. And you take nuggets or gems, whatever you want to call them, from each book, and you put them together, and what you can create in your life is incredible, right? That's why it's so important to keep reading and be a learner throughout your life. We don't ever stop learning. Going back to what you said about connection, because connection is at the platform and at the cusp of everything that I'm all about. I don't think we truly understand the importance of human connection. Maybe we did more so with the pandemic happening, because of that. But the key here, connection is so urgently important. But you said one very important thing that really stands out that I really work with my own clients on, and that is connecting with people, not because you have something in mind of what you need from them.
Right.
Authentic communication and connection is so beautiful, and things naturally, whatever happens and flows naturally that comes from that is supposed to be.
Yeah.
But from this very self-minded place, that's transactional, and transactions come and go. And that's
right.
And relationships are what stay and stick. So I love all that you're saying. I think I really also believe we meet everybody for a reason. So I'm glad that we've gotten to meet, and thanks for sharing all of that.
Well, what would the world be like if everyone actually considered others as more important than themselves? And that ability to give kindness, kind of like we talked about with, earlier before the show about your father being known for let's give and demonstrate kindness. And so what I find, in a business or a startup world, you need to be able to do a lot of listening, and that tenacious nature of an entrepreneur can also be a little bit bulldozing. And so you have to be very careful to be quick to listen and slow to speak. And, one of the things one of my mentors, Ron Price, taught me was something he learned along the way, which is, in every conversation, there are always two experts. There's the expert of intent and the expert of impact. And so when you're talking to someone and you upset them, you always kind of want to focus on, well, I didn't intend to do that. Wasn't my intention. Well, you need to put on their shoes and go, well, they're the expert of the impact that you made. And so if you step on someone's toe, you may not have intended to, but the impact was very painful. And so sometimes it's very helpful to remember, wait a minute, let's realize you're the expert of my impact, and I need to listen to you from that perspective.
Wow. When are you writing your book?
Well, my book would be a compilation of a lot of other people's great wisdom I've been gloriously pleased to be picking up. But
but your take is incredible. I think that, and I'm writing a book, and I think it's so important because, the way you put things, people connect. You talk about connection, is that they may not connect with all of those authors, but the way you put it, it could. My whole thing is you connect with one person, you've already changed the world, and that's really what life is all about. And so I know that we probably could sit and talk about philosophy and connection for the whole hour, but I do also want to talk about the incredible work that you are doing. And before I get there, though, I did say in your bio, TedMed 2013 Frontline Scholar, and I don't know everything about that and what that means. So I'd love for you to share what that means, because that's a big accomplishment for you.
TedMed is a phenomenal series of meetings. TED itself is an extraordinary dispenser of great wisdom and great thought leadership. And I had the honor of going to TedMed for a number of years. And one of the years they offered these, frontline scholars, which really were people who are in startups dealing with healthcare and kind of on the front lines of innovation. And so we qualified for that and was honored to attend. In fact, I think that meeting, it might have been the one where the people at 23andMe were there just releasing their new product, and they gave it to all of us who are attending. And so I'm finding cousins and aunts and uncles all over the world that are now connected. But, TedMed is a tremendous environment where they're always thinking about what's next and discussing that with great minds. And that's something that I'm a big believer on, thinking about the forefront of what's coming. And, when you're dealing with innovation, the other thing I really am a big believer in is another thing I learned from a a great mentor, is being able to have great ideological debate without relational conflict. Because, the ideas are really what matter, and ideas can come from any person at any level of a corporation or an organization of any kind. But I really believe ideas are strengthened when they're debated. And sometimes someone will pose a hypothesis that really needs to be challenged. And in that challenging, sometimes people get emotional or defensive. But if you can stay neutral and if you can stay relationally positive and yet argue it, it strengthens it, it hones it, much like sandpaper. And by the time you're done, if you can keep from the relational conflict, you can have really strong concepts that are much better, because, the first version of anything you write is never good. It's great after you revise it. There's no such thing as a writer. We're all rewriters. So, it takes multiple versions. And so I find in a startup or in an environment where we've got innovation, you really need to set a culture that invites people to disagree with you. But if they do it in a way that's all about collaboration and not disrespect, you can really create a culture that I think is one of the strongest places in the world. But often it's hard for people to disagree with the founder or the CEO. But we've really tried to set a mark that said, no, it doesn't matter what your position is. I really value people who push back and make things stronger, because it actually challenges strategy. It also opens up and exposes knowledge gaps or strategic holes that need to be thought through. So I just love that combination of ideological debate without relational conflict.
I think it's an exercise in putting your ego to the side, right? I mean, you have to do that in that kind of, if you're talking about what you just shared, it's totally take your ego, putting it to the side. You can debate and you can discuss, but it can be in a kind way. And that's very important.
Yes, ego is often an enemy to many, many things. And pride is never something that usually is rewarded with anything but punishment at some point. But, the other thing is I actually like losing debates, especially publicly, because if I lose a debate and then I actually prefer their idea more than mine, that really fosters the concept that I'm not kidding around. We really do want people to, debate ideas, no matter what your title is. So I think it's good for the culture.
Absolutely. And the other piece of what you said about no matter what the title, that is another thing that it doesn't matter. We're humans. Doesn't matter what your title. It doesn't matter your background. What matters is just coming from a place of understanding. And that, again, that's another piece of, of ego that can get in the way, especially when you talk about hierarchy. Servant leadership, is something I talk a lot about on the podcast. And an event that I've coming up, I have the author of the Changemaker Playbook, and he talks about Henry DeCio Jr. and he talks about the whole game change when it comes to how the hierarchy is handled within organizations. It's everyone plays together as opposed to, coming down from one solo person, dictating what it's supposed to be like. So I see you're in that very similar mindset.
Mm-hmm. Who's great about that as well as Ken Blanchard is a huge servant leader mindset type of a person who is extraordinary when it comes to business leadership. But so much of what I think motivates Ken Blanchard is that servant's heart, and he's just extraordinary.
Empathy is not a word that's talked about enough.
True, very true.
And that's, and empathy in business, if you go back to the 80s and 90s, nobody said the word empathy when you were in corporate America. It wasn't about empathy. Yes. So
well, some of the new younger, team members, millennials, et cetera, are so much more missional driven. And, they care a whole lot about their families, and this whole idea of being gone from your family and traveling all the time, that's a real foreign concept to some of these younger people who are really helping some of the, boomer generation realize a lot of us made a mistake of giving too much to our careers. I think we talked about it as well. But I think empathy as well. Dr. Les Parrott, another great friend and mentor, talks about if you only had one thing in your marriage, one attribute, it's empathy that would really help your marriage survive. Because when you care about the other party, it does something relationally that very few other things can, engender in bringing closeness.
Yeah, absolutely. Heart driven, right? We've got to let our heart drive us just a little bit more.
Pam 10 is a leader in IT enterprise solutions and staffing. They are driven to transform their clients' business performances. They do this every day by providing their clients with the best services and products like BizLego, an online community platform, and Colear, a unique learning management system. They also transform the lives of women and children through their associated nonprofits, SheTech, which supports women in and joining the technology field, and Sofkin, support organization for kids in need. Pam 10, technology for social good. Go to pam10.com for more information.
During the intro, we talked a little bit, I mentioned about that you led one of the first hospital pilots to use the iPad for patient engagement at the Disney Children's Hospital in Orlando. So I do want to talk about that for a minute, because that sounded totally incredible and had to be an amazing experience. Can you share about that?
Yeah, so much of my career has been at this intersection between content and technology. And so people kind of forget, before 2005, we really didn't have any video on the internet at all. It was all dial-up. It was those modems, that made that sound. You've got mail, et cetera. That was 56K. So in 2005, 2006, broadband hit the scene at 256K. It was just this lightning fast, 5 times faster than dial-up. And it's kind of laughable now to think about that speed, but we had a technology company that was working on ways to be able to make short form video come together in a sequence we call an arc of engagement. So if someone was going through, let's say, hip replacement surgery, and back then we worked with Johnson & Johnson, and Coach K had 2 hip replacement surgeries and he was their spokesperson. So we would actually film him going through that process and walking you through it. And then we'd put it in a technology sequence that would put it in bite-sized pieces, about 2 to 3 minute videos in an arc. So you'd watch them one at a time. Because everyone loves video, but if it's not entertainment, they always want it to be short.
Right.
So we built it into a sequence so someone could click and watch the next one, but they were built into this through line. And so back then, we were doing this with the latest technology at the time, email and PCs. And then Steve Jobs in January of 2010 announced this amazing thing called the iPad. It was going to be coming out in April. And so the iPad, which we still use today, we kind of forget there was no such thing as an iPad before 2010. And so we got with our CTO and I said, we need to figure out a way to put our sequence-based technology onto this new thing called the iPad, because it's going to let you hold the internet in your hands. It's going to free it up. It'll be open for so many other people, particularly in healthcare, to use it. And so we got our engineers together, and so they started working to build our current technology into this thing called the iPad, which no one could touch yet because they didn't release it. And so we worked with the software developers kit, and our engineers went to work. And then we had been relating to the great hospital there in Florida. It's the only Disney Children's Hospital there, Florida Hospital, which is now Advent Health. And the leaders there loved this idea of being able to use our what we called a journey log technology. And so we developed an app for the iPad. We had to do it without one in our hands because it didn't get released until April. And so we built this journey for children to understand what it's like to go through an MRI. And so that's a little scary for some kids. And so we had this really great bear character that walked them through it. We put these sequence of videos together. We built it into this app. And then we had team members at the stores in different parts of the country so that the moment they opened up at these Apple stores, they could buy it, download our app that we didn't know if it was going to work because we never had an iPad until it was in their hands. And then we brought it to that hospital as well as one right here in Boise in our backyard. And they deployed it to their patients that day. And we got national news, and it created all this excitement. And then it showed the children using this to help prepare them for their MRI. And I was a little worried because it got them even too excited, almost like, I can't wait to go into the MRI. So I'm not sure we want to go quite that far.
Right.
It was a really good example, though, of thinking about what's coming, using new technology, and thinking about eliminating the friction in the patient experience and working with great innovators with these hospitals that wanted to go to the next kind of level of patient care.
Right. What? You're such a great storyteller, by the way.
Huh.
Like, I could just listen to you talk, see how excited you get about it. And you took us on that journey of exactly, I felt like I was there with you watching this all happen. So thank you for that. That was great. And incredible work that you're doing and help and all the help, you're definitely someone who wants to give back with every position. As we're going through your career today, we can feel how connected you are to kindness, like you said, but also to sharing your wisdom. I know wisdom makes us sound like we're older now, but
we are.
We can't lie about it, right? We're not allowed to do that. But it is true. And the younger generation, even though we might have been the workaholics a little bit, and I think I still am at times, they are teaching us too now. So, and you know what, we showed them what it was like our way, and they said, no, we want some more time. So like,
yes. They're more
And
wise than
that's-
we are. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. We all learn from each other, and everybody is either your teacher or your student, depending on the conversation and the moment in the conversation.
It's
So,
good.
so after Disney, helping with the Disney piece and the iPad piece and all the work that you did there, when did Engage Technologies come into your life?
Yeah, so Engage Technologies is kind of the evolution of the work we've been doing. And over the course of that 10 years or so, we were developing methods of storytelling using email and PCs. And then kind of people forget that it was only a handful of years ago that the modern day cell phone was able to play video. So the iPhone actually came out in, June of 2007. And so it was a number of years before it was capable of playing video. And now, of course, we finally have the moment when you've got a smartphone in virtually every pocket, every purse, capable of streaming high volume video. And so we've taken all the things we've learned about storytelling and put them into a breakthrough technology, which is what Engage Technologies is all about now. And so when you think about it, attention is the most important thing that we can have kind of in the marketing world or the healthcare world, where you want to have someone engage with your product or your offering. Attention is difficult, and most people would agree that attention spans, do you think they're longer or shorter today than they've ever been?
Shorter.
So most of us would agree, very short attention spans. However, there is a context. I want to tell you something that might sound a little odd at first. I actually believe we have the longest attention spans in history right now in 2022, the longest.
Okay.
And I can actually prove it with 2 words.
Okay.
Ready for the 2 words?
I'm ready. I can't wait.
Okay. Binge watching.
Right.
Binge watching commands the longest amount of catatonic-like state staring at any time in our history. So when you and I were kids, no one would stare at the television for an entire weekend or all night long. And so I started thinking one day about how is it that we've got this agreeable short attention span world, and yet there's this circumstance when people admit to spending an entire giant amount of time in almost like a catatonic state.
You're right. And I've been guilty of it.
Yeah.
I have been guilty.
Well, have. And so I started thinking, what are the elements? Because it breaks the mold and it flips the conversation into something that really is kind of counterintuitive. And so I started realizing it's really 3 things. You have to have all 3 of them. The first one is you have to have a arrestingly well-told story. Just because there's something on Netflix doesn't mean you're going to watch it. It has to be really well told. Sometimes there's hundreds of channels and nothing to watch. You're flipping through the channels.
100% been there.
No. So number 1 is a story. It has to be well told. Secondly, though, you have to also bring in automation, because what happens now, as soon as a Netflix episode is over, it queues up the next one.
Next one. I love that. Isn't that beautiful?
Yes. And now they even have the button, skip the intro. So if you think about it, you could buy the box set of VHS of Friends or the DVD set of West Wing, but we didn't binge watch our DVDs. You could have, but it wasn't a thing. And I started thinking about why, and that's the third element. In order to binge watch your DVD set, you had to get up and change the DVD tray. Now you have to, shower after that because it's so hard. There's a lot of perspiration in changing the tray. Right? It's so hard. But even though that was simple, it was a break in the interaction that made you have a moment of sanity, like I need to go to bed. Well, because of the third issue, which is the elimination of friction. If you get rid of the friction, changing a DVD tray, where it's automatically putting you to the next component, that will keep our attention going over the course of hours or even, a few days. And so that's when I realized, wow, long attention spans, even in the shortest attention span world, is because of 3 things: powerful story, introduction of automation, and the elimination of friction. So with that as a premise, we created a whole offering at Engage Technologies using modern day mobile technology that's moving away from mobile delivery to mobile intelligence. So our technology framework is the only one we're aware of so far in the marketplace, according to our clients, that allows us to be able to get rid of the friction. So we figured out a way to move short form videos onto someone's phone that would be in sequence, that would take them on a journey right when they're diagnosed, or let's say they're going through, eye surgery. Cataract surgery is the #1 surgery in the world. All of us will get cataracts at some point. And it's this little thing in your eye where they have to cut it out and put a lens in. There's a lot of education for a patient to know that. So we developed a method where on your mobile phone, people kind of have a mass consumer shift to mobile first, love the use of video. And most of us, when you ask anyone around the world, what's your preferred mechanism of communication? Almost everyone will say text. Love text.
Yes.
And what's great about text, of course, is it's got the promise of brevity. It is automatic in its delivery. And no matter how busy you are, most all of us have inbox 0 in our text. And it also doesn't have the chaos of email nor the spam. And it also doesn't have something else. Social media is nice, but it's a never-ending river.
It is.
So text is kind of this really quiet eddy in our lives that allows us to be able to have just our friends and family, or if we raise our hand, we let someone into our text world. And so what we've done is combine those three big mass consumer shifts of mobile, video, and text and put them into one platform. But now we figured out how to get rid of the pressure and the friction. No apps, no emails, no passwords. We figured out how to put someone on a journey without any of those normally associated barriers to make it free, or make it, well, free to use, but also super easy to deliver a patient journey.
Wow, that's incredible. So now how many people are on your team or with you over at Engage?
Yeah, so full-time, we have about 75 people on the team. We've raised a little over $20 million in our company, and we're now serving a lot of healthcare markets in dentistry, optometry, ophthalmology, hospitals, and now we're excited to be expanding into the aesthetic world, into plastic surgery, dermatology, and med spas. What they all kind of have in common is a substantial literacy or knowledge gap between what the patient knows and what the doctor or the expert knows. And so this technology helps sequence video content that helps explain those big knowledge gaps very easily and without the friction, using short sequences of video.
So how does it get into the consumer's hand, the patient's hand?
Yes. Well, would you like me to show you? Quick
I
demo?
would, yes, that'd be great.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me just, if I can share this, do you have your cell phone handy? We'll actually do a quick demo. I can show it to you. So
Let me turn it on. It's not on.
So if you actually take your cell phone and just open up your camera, and if it points your camera at that big QR code here, we don't use QR codes the same way anyone else does. When you point it, it's going to actually, when you tap it, it'll open up a text, not a link. And so when you point there, it brings up a text, and then the text gets automatically filled out when you tap it with the name of the doctor's practice. In this case, Bright Eyes, is the name of the practice. And then you tap send. And when you tap send, it sends a text to the practice, and then it sends you a text right back from the practice. And all there is one simple step. They ask you to opt in with yes from your doctor. And you tap YES, and that's it. And that allows both HIPAA and TCPA compliance. And so this little blue link that comes up after you tap yes is from your doctor. And when you tap it, it's unique to your phone, and voila, you get the first short video episode from your doctor that's about 90 seconds long. That starts to explain this yellow brick road of content to you in 90-second bites.
Michael, that's incredible.
Isn't that simple?
That is simple. It's simple for all ages.
Yes.
Everybody, and that's very important because of the fact that we have generations, multiple generations going through very different things.
Yes.
You want to make it as simple as possible. I'm so glad you had that ready to go. I want everybody to know that was not even pre-planned. That was perfect. That was so awesome. And such a great way to support patients who are nervous and scared and not sure what to expect, because, certain doctors will spend a long time with you. Others, you're kind of in there, 2 seconds. This is the time you got to be at it. This is what we're going to do. And they're out. This is like a little bit of more of support, a little bit more information in short snippets, right? So because that's the other thing. It's not like binge watching. So you can only get them for a bit, and it might be too much to take in all at once. So it's nice that it's broken up.
Well, and as you notice, what was amazing about this new technology is we finally gotten to the place where it's simple. And notice I didn't have to ask you to give me your cell number or an email address, but because the new operating systems on the phones have that QR code recognition right built in, because QR codes were brilliant, but it required an app, which is friction. And so now what we have the ability to do is summon it. Now, we're not a QR code company. The QR code, all it does is automated text, because you can manually text the word to a keyword. But what we've done with a simple touch card, we can also send it to the patient. They don't have to scan it like if they're at home. But now it sends you on this yellow brick road of 90-second to 2-minute content. So if you binge watch 4 videos in a row and you stop, the next morning, it gives you episode 5. It knows where you are. And if you forget to watch episode 7, for example, the technology knows that you didn't watch it. And so 90 minutes later, you get a text that says, oops, Dr. Johnson wants to remind you to please watch this important video as it relates to upcoming surgery. So it's this really nice way to kind of have a beautiful holding of the hand of the patient, kind of a concierge experience all the way through. But the real key here, this is a trusted relationship between doctor and patient. And our technology enables that to be possible, but it's wrapped in the brand of the provider, not our brand. We don't put our name anywhere on it. We want to make it look like the doctor invented it.
That's so, and that, and now that you're talking about it like this, I think about things that have come up for me that I've used or whatever. And you always think it's, the doctor's brilliance or, some other organization's brilliant. And so it's so great that, you're there. There's no ego, right? The ego's out of it because they engage. Yeah, it's a serve. And they don't know engage. They know Dr. Smith, basically gave me this information. So you're not getting the accolades, but you're totally doing all the work. And that is true giving. That's awesome.
That's exactly right. So that's what really brings us joy. We transform lives by delivering timely wisdom. That's our company's motto. And so it's a real honor to do that in a number of areas. Healthcare is one of the biggest environments that we serve in. And the patient's journey is filled with anxiety and challenges. And if you can actually lower that anxiety, help them understand, particularly in environments where like eye surgery, that's scary. But once they begin to learn, wow, that's actually not scary at all now that I understand it, or hip or knee or, whatever the surgery may be. And the other key thing is we talk a lot about the patient experience, but, there's a lot of healthcare fatigue. COVID has really put healthcare at the forefront of people's minds, of these heroes that serve us. So one of the other things this does is it really helps take the monotony out of a doctor's life, because guess what? You get to watch all this before you show up. So now you and the doctor can have a much more educated discussion. You come in as a senior instead of a freshman. So it's a much better experience for them as well as the patient.
And you also don't come in with Google. I love Google. Google's everybody's best friend, but you can go down the Google hole of seeing things that you shouldn't see when you're going into a surgical procedure.
Yes.
That at least this is educated. It's put together and it has, not the what ifs, so all the different what ifs that scare everybody when they're going into something like that.
Right.
So.
Well, and everyone's time is precious. And so our medical advisory board members who help us design this entire patient experience, we map the whole patient experience and we put it into our technology and we shoot and produce all the content. And because we've spent the time brooding over the design, listening to the people who've done it for their whole careers, this allows us to make a content experience that's exactly to the map of what the patient needs. And so it kind of feels like we're reading their mind because, hey, it's the night before surgery. Make sure you don't eat. Oh, I'm so glad this reminded me of that. Hey, good morning. It's the morning after. This is normal to feel this way. The surgical site should look like this. So it's really nice to be able to take that wisdom and put it into an environment where it's almost like you're reading their mind all the way through their journey.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Michael. That's phenomenal. Now, how many years has Engage been in business?
Yeah, just over 5 years. And so we are now continuing to roll out our offerings much more broadly. We're working with some of the greatest companies in the world, and now we're expanding internationally. And so we're just really honored to be able to bring this technology and the new simplicity. And also it's so much less expensive. So it brings the cost of care down as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. In terms, as we talked before, it's like when we talk technology, layman's terms always works best for me. That's what I'm mostly the novice. Yeah, and you're such a change maker. Truly fit exactly the description of that. What is your definition of change maker?
For me and for our company, change is really about serving others and figuring out ways for knowledge, when wisely brought to them in the right moment of their life, can change their leadership, their marriage, their healthcare journey, their encouragement, their hope. And so really, there's this truth that says truth sets people free. And so we want to scale truth to really add value to people's lives in just about every corner of opportunities to be able to do that in a way that fits into the lifestyle of our modern day life. And so our ability to change is to find new ways to innovate and to serve and to find a new method to be able to make people say, I'm so glad I came into contact with whoever that was a part of their journey. So it's great to be behind the scenes and serving people in that manner.
I love that. You asked me a question before the podcast. You said, well, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want the end result to be? I want to turn that on you now and say, what do you want people to walk away with from this episode from you?
Probably the opportunity to really think about what else could be. We live in one of the greatest moments of inflection, probably of almost anyone's lifetime. And so I guess for people to think about what they could add value to in their own knowledge base. All of us have been given a beautiful piece of experience that no one else has but that person. And so I guess I would encourage people to think about how they can encourage others and use their unique perspective to add innovation and value to those around them.
That's awesome. So last question. And the last question is, what is the footprint you're creating right now that you want to be known for?
Well, primarily, hopefully known for being a honoring husband and a good father. And when you've got little girls that are growing up and getting married, the footprint I want to leave for them is a legacy of honor and encouragement, and a legacy of inspiring others to do something that can change the world themselves. So hopefully being a great dad and a great leader who serves others.
That's great. All beautiful. So Mike, like I said, I'm so glad that we had this conversation, that I got to meet you, learn about your career path, and everybody who's listening, learn about you and Engage Technologies. And I think it's just wonderful that, Zoom came along and gives us the opportunity to interview great people from all over the world. And so thank you for being a guest today.
My pleasure. And Jody, thank you for a life of giving and supporting and taking care of a family yourself. This is not easy to run a show like this. You do it well. So it's an honor to be with you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. And I look forward to hopefully doing more work with you in the future and having you back on for an update on all the wonderful things that are going to be to come for you.
That'd be a privilege.
Thank you. So again, thank you so much to Michael Boerner for being a part of the podcast today and sharing his wisdom, knowledge, and his change-making spirit. And I want to say what I say at the end of every single podcast. Today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what small or large step are you going to take today to get yourself closer to your goal? Thank you again, Michael, and have a fabulous week, everyone. Bye.
Thanks so much.